Well, greetings, friends and life travelers and people who are grappling with everything that's going on in life. Welcome to another episode of Soul Empowerment. This is your source for all kinds of great information about how to live a great life. And I am so grateful. I'm David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, and I'm so grateful to have with me my two good friends, Stephanie Benedetto Padovani and Nancy Stevens. I will ask Stephanie, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Oh, and hi, Victoria. I see that you've joined us. I'm glad you're here, but could you mind turning off your camera, please? Thanks. Anyway, go ahead. Stephanie, help introduce yourself.
Yes, so I am Stephanie, as David so clearly introduced me. I am a wild creation coach and soul storyteller. What I've just realized, a new way to articulate what the heck it is that I do, is really I am helping entrepreneurs in particular, but I'm helping people to design the art of their lives, like basically live their lives in their way. So that's how I'll express it today. You know, like what if you could live your business your way? What's your way of doing business and marketing in alignment with the lifestyle that you desire and the way that you are most joyful in doing it? So that's a little bit about what I do, sometimes anyway.
Right. Hi, Victoria, you're back on again. Could you please turn off your camera? This is just a presentation, and you're welcome to stay, but just stay in audio mode. Thank you. Go ahead, Nancy. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Your turn.
No problem. I am Nancy Stevens, and the work I do here on Mother Planet Earth is work as, amongst other things, I'm a life and health coach. And my beautiful calling is to help people be in a healthier relationship with themselves by creating healthy boundaries in their work life, their personal life, and in all other areas so they can thrive. And that means looking at the emotional habits, physical habits, and crafting a life plan that gives them the ability to move from not feeling well balanced to thriving and balancing. And when I'm not doing that, I'm out hiking a lot. I love nature. And we have a dog named Doug who is not here right now. But if you hear a bark, well, there you go. Or if you see a team
dog named Doug, I like it.
Dog named Doug. Yeah.
Well, so we're all in the field of supporting people to have better lives. And that's what we're here today to do as a group. We're here to help people empower their souls, to bring their souls more present into whatever they do in life, and to understand the oneness that we have between our physical being and our spiritual being, and to make that more present and more manifest in our lives. So I'm excited because today we're talking about, I think, a really powerful topic, compassion. And we're going to look at compassion from a variety of different perspectives. We're going to ask a lot of questions about it. We're going to give our perspective on it. And you who are listening, you're more than welcome to insert your ideas or questions into the chat, and we will do our best to respond to those as we go. And we plan to be here for about an hour, so just settle back, relax, grab your cup of coffee, and let's just enjoy ourselves. So I guess what I'd like to do is start with a basic question. I mean, what exactly is compassion? Who would like to begin that discussion?
That's a good one. What is compassion? I would say it's knowing that you are part of humanity, part of everyone's suffering with your suffering, but from a place that has a positive, loving vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's nice. Stephanie, what do you think?
David, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because when we had discussed this, it was clear to me that you had really pondered this. And it's something that I'm like, geez, what is compassion? And I have a feeling of it. And I have a feeling of, perhaps when it's lacking in my life. but I haven't made the distinctions. The distinctions that you've made were really helpful to me. So I would love it if you would share that again, and then maybe I'll pipe in and go, yeah, me too.
I'll do the same. I'll do the same.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Stephanie. But I want to be clear: I'm not the authority on compassion.
That's not what I said.
Yeah, right.
I
have my experience of it, and the way I tend to have an engineer's mind. I tend to think of things in a scientific way, and I tend to categorize things a certain way and that sort of thing. So as I was contemplating the notion of compassion, a couple of key words came up for me in my I guess research. Well, the two words that are most commonly used in conjunction with compassion are sympathy and empathy. Mm-hmm. And sympathy, I think we all kind of know what sympathy is. Sympathy is a kind of sense where, I understand you're feeling bad. I don't necessarily feel the same way, but I feel sorry for you. I have that sense of sympathy. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, sympathy is it can almost be a denigrating feeling, like I'm looking down on you. There's something wrong with you. I have to feel sorry for you. Certainly when someone expresses sympathy towards me, that's how it seems to land on me. So sympathy doesn't really resonate as a true feeling at all for me. Does that kind of make sense for you guys?
Yeah. I've never had a good relationship with sympathy because it just makes you feel like you're already not feeling good, and it just makes you feel so much less. It makes the other person feel superior, I guess, or you inferior.
Yeah, that's a good word, superiority. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I noticed that energy showing up too whenever I've experienced sympathy. Yeah. What about you, Stephanie? Does that kind of make sense?
Yes. And it's sort of like sympathy to me. Actually, I feel a lot of, I'm feeling compassion for myself and others when I'm in that place of sympathy, because it seems more like, I can't really handle this, whatever it is you're feeling. So I'm sorry for you, but it's kind of like, but it has nothing to do with me, and please take it somewhere else. It almost feels like that.
Okay. Yep.
As opposed to, now I'm having a sense of compassion that I can share with you a little bit. Like, compassion to me feels like I'm in this with you, and it's not, I don't need to fix it, but I'm in it with you. It's like, it's openness. It's being with, as opposed to kind of being outside of and looking, going, that must suck. Like.
Right. Okay, so I hear what you're talking about. And when I experience that feeling, to me, that is empathy. Mm-hmm. That is, I'm there with you. I feel, I have a similar kind of feeling in my body. Like, for example, I don't know what you might be going through, but I have that same feeling in my body. It's kind of a projection, actually. See, I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but I have this idea of what you're feeling because I have a kind of I hate to use the word, but a sympathetic response in my body. And as a result, I feel that energy flowing through me, and I believe it's the same as yours. So it's a form of projection in a way. So that's just empathy, I think. And where I think I draw the line to compassion is empathy is present, and at the same time, I sense there's some suffering going on. So I'm aware of some suffering. You are in some kind of pain. You are in a place where, I can tell you don't want to be there. And so in addition to the empathy that I feel, I feel this strong desire inside me to take some action to help reduce the suffering. So in my view of the world, compassion is a combination of empathy and a desire to reduce the suffering. The two pieces come together. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I actually act on that desire. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. I mean, if I see something that, a person's in life-threatening danger, I probably will react without really noticing my compassion. And I'll be in a place of life-saving mode rather than just simply being present and offering some kind of support. So when I think compassion comes into play and really gets present, now I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can really feel what you're feeling. I get it. And I can sense that you're in some distress or some pain. And I'm assuming you want to get out of that, right? Now, how I can act on that compassion without disempowering you is to say, is there something you would like me to do to help right now? Rather than just diving in and trying to fix the problem. That's how I see it.
I like the word disempower. That's, not you're sharing rather than thinking it's your job.
Right.
Leaving it into the hands of the person who is shared where they're at. That's a pretty strong facet, I think, of compassion.
Yeah.
I think I appreciate the distinction that you make between empathy and compassion, and I notice it. I'm also finding, and I'm wondering if you two find this too, that when I'm really in that space of empathy, compassion is like follows. Like it's almost impossible for it not to follow, which is probably why I don't experience the distinction the same, because as soon as I'm with that person where they are, I feel for whatever pain they have, and I have a desire to relieve it. And not a need to just like, oh, wow, if I could, I surely would relieve you of this pain. It may not be mine to do, but I feel that inclination. Does that follow? Like, do you think that it's
absolutely
empathy that opens the door?
Right. Well, I have a judgment about you, Stephanie, and that judgment is that you are, just by your very nature, a very compassionate person. I think that you are naturally quite compassionate, and you tend to fall into that place of compassion very easily. And that's just something that I've learned about you just through the few months that I've known you. Now, that's not true for everybody. Sometimes I know for myself, I didn't really know what compassion was. For many years of my life, I didn't understand the concept. I'd heard about it, I knew there was a word out there that I had some sense of what it meant, but I didn't really know what it was to experience compassion until it happened to me in a men's group. All right. And I was in this situation where these other men were going through processes, and one man in particular was sharing something very deep and personal and vulnerable that really touched a chord inside me, because he was describing a situation that was very similar to something that I had gone through in my own life. And so naturally, I started feeling that empathy. I could feel tears coming up. I could feel, the energy of sadness and everything. And I definitely was starting to feel pain, and I wanted to try and reduce his pain. That was my first visceral experience that I can recall of ever having compassion. And it was beautiful. I loved it. I didn't know what to do with it, but at the time, you see, so that's how I really started to learn about it. And I started to understand where it came from. And so I resonate with what you're saying, and I honor you for just being the kind of person you are, and for being born into compassion and carrying that through your life. Well, I think it's beautiful.
I'm compelled to share. And before I say this too, for those who are listening and watching, and I'm so excited that you're here, I would love to know what's coming up for you around this. What questions do you have around compassion? And the question I have for you is, do you consider yourself a compassionate person? Do you see yourself as compassionate? I'd love to know. Simple yes or no, or sometimes, or whatever. Like, if you care to share, that would be awesome. I can remember having this experience that might be considered compassion from a very young age, but I see now when I look back that it was very, very confused with sympathy and managing my own pain. So it was sort of like I didn't know, like I can tell you, I would see kids on the playground and somebody was picking on this little kid, and I would feel compelled to try to mediate that conflict at a young age. Or we raised chickens in science class. We were incubating eggs into little chicks, and they would hatch. And the ones that I would want to take home were the broken ones, the ones with the, But I think it came from this well-intentioned but misguided sense of trying to make myself okay or prove myself by being that person who is helpful and compassionate. And it wasn't the purest form of compassion or a more clean, I would say clean, which I can now experience more. And I'm not saying I do that perfectly, I don't, but now it's more like, oh, I can be here, I can love you, I can want to relieve your pain, and also know that it's not my job to do it. And it's totally okay if I don't. And that's a distinction that I notice. I used to get very confused when I was young. I didn't know that. I didn't see that.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you touched on something that I'm going to come back to, but before I do, I just want to comment. I'm glad to see Victoria. Thank you for sharing. I believe you are a compassionate person. And Rainbow, yes, I think HSP stands for highly sensitive person. I want to make sure I've got that correct. And I can understand, I agree with you. If you are highly sensitive, then when you are feeling that sense of empathy for someone, it can be pretty intense. And so managing that intensity can be difficult. So thank you for sharing, Rainbow. I appreciate that. And Stephanie, what I wanted to get back to, you talked about this, noticing an aspect of yourself where maybe your sympathy was geared towards trying to give the impression that you cared about somebody. And I think, believe me, you're not alone in that. I am 100% certain that everybody experiences that at some point. We all want to be loved. We will all want to be approved of. We all look for ways of getting that approval. And sometimes putting on this show of being compassionate could be a way of getting approval. So in a sense, we can be using compassion as a shadow tool to create this sense of approval for ourselves. And my hope is that people will understand when that happens and they will find a way out of it and honor the truth. Okay, I guess I see what I'm doing now. I'm actually just trying to get you to like me. You might not say that out loud to the other person, but you can say that to yourself. And when you do that, now you can choose the same or a different thing. You may come from the same place, still want to be compassionate and supportive, but at the same time want to honor the truth of who you are.
Yeah. So fascinating. Yeah, I'm kind of taking in what you shared, Stephanie. I think way back in the day, as I was beginning growing and developing, I know I had glimmers of genuine compassion, but it was raw and undeveloped. And I fostered having sympathy or even pity as a means of supposedly outwardly expressing that I was a decent human by caring for that person. But what my journey taught me was that really, to me, was not really caring for that person. It was just expressing that to sound better. And it wasn't until I really began to notice how I was really feeling deep within that I began to progress into learning what it meant to be compassionate, to have compassion. And my journey is I had to learn to love myself. What I learned was, how could I really extend compassion and empathy if I didn't have that in my life with me? I had to really work in that area. And today, with all the things going on in the world, I've really felt a sense of collective oneness with those who have experienced lots of loss and those who are, in different places. And it's a definite, very personal sensation or feeling that each of us, that's just unique to each of us. But it is definitely an energy that when you are practicing compassion, I think it just flows from within, and you're not attaching what you think others are going to think of you or how this is going to be seen. It just occurs as a extension of myself. Yeah.
You mentioned the word pity, and I just wanted to draw attention to that. I actually think pity and sympathy derive from the same root. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I seem to recall doing an entomological search a while back, and I found the two words were related. So it's interesting that you should use that word. And I'm pretty sure that people understand the difference now between pity and empathy. There's quite a difference.
Yeah.
In energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Those two, pity and sympathy, as you said, they really disempower and the other person and take away any sense of self or dignity, because you are looking at them from a superior view. And the tool of compassion and empathy puts everybody on an equal playing field. It really shares that we're all in this together, our shared joy and our shared suffering.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question that's occurring to me that I'd like to ask of everyone who's here, if you care to share. And that is, where do you have the most trouble being or experiencing compassion? So that's what I'm asking that of myself right now. I'm like, So in this question, like I asked you, do you consider yourself a compassionate person? And I think about that. I think that most people would probably say they have an experience of compassion around me. But my experience of myself is that sometimes I feel compassion and sometimes I feel other things. And that there's a lot. So am I a compassionate person? I don't know. Dave and I were just before this talking about the word to be. And, I think it's not that simple. I either am or am not compassionate as a person.
Right.
I'm feeling compassion in this moment or I'm not. I feel connected to compassion or I don't. It seems to me that, like all these things, when I get still, that's compassion. Like that's where I find it, is in the stillness, and it's always there. It's not like it's something that sometimes I don't have. I just sometimes don't experience it because I'm caught up in thinking and the world just looks different. And it's very hard in those moments when I'm in pain and I'm projecting it onto the world. It could be as simple as, I woke up with a headache and everything looks ugly to me today. And so now I'm go for a drive and somebody cuts me off, and I get to the cash register and somebody cuts me off at the store, or somebody gives me what I think is a dirty look. In those moments, I'm not feeling compassion. That's when I'm most likely, when I'm saying there's something wrong with myself or there's something wrong with the world, it's very hard to be compassionate, to feel compassion. As I'm talking about it, that's what's coming up for me.
Yeah, that's very good. And I appreciate your sharing that, because we are all going through shifts constantly, and here's something else to think about. I noticed this for myself. What does it mean to be totally still? When I get into that place of stillness, I'm not feeling anger. I'm not feeling fear. I'm not feeling sadness. I'm not really feeling anything. It's a nice, beautiful sense of contentedness and relaxation. You see what I'm saying? But does that mean I'm not compassionate? Not at all. It just means that in that moment, compassion isn't something that I'm experiencing. And so I think it's beautiful that you brought that up. All of us are going through this constant shift. Sometimes we're going to be quite agitated because of something going on. And what's the agitation coming from? Well, it's probably coming from some internal ego mind desire to have something that's not happening. It's an attachment to a particular desire or outcome that isn't happening right now. That's usually why we get agitated. Or at least I think we can probably funnel it down to some kind of attachment to a particular outcome. So the same thing when you call it agitation now, or maybe it escalates into anger or rage or whatever. The whole bottom line is you're just not getting what you want. Well, is there a way to get what you want without being agitated? That's the question. And can you be compassionate with yourself for having gotten agitated in the first place? Instead of beating yourself up and saying, oh, damn it, I got agitated again. Now I am just turning into a total asshole.
I reacted again. To me, part of my work on fostering compassion is in responding, pausing when I feel that trigger coming on, which right now there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Being really, giving myself, knowing that, okay, I have a lot of emotions around this, and really working to pause before reacting so I can respond with what I hope is an appropriate or really intentional way of being with myself, with my thoughts and feelings, or with another. That, to me, being able to pause and respond goes hand in hand with with fostering and having compassion. Because so many of us react, right? You said being agitated, then being really ticked off that we've lost it. That's what I'm working on during this time, is really noticing what comes up, pausing, and then seeking to respond to my needs or what would be the best for another. And I like what Victoria wrote. You said when you're in pain or discomfort, you do self-care. And that is definitely a beautiful way of offering yourself compassion. Is
Sure.
You've responded. So see, Victoria, thank you for siding with me. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's all about getting people on your side, Nancy. That's why we're here.
It's so compassionate. It just is.
Well, and I wanted to comment on what Rainbow said too. She talks about how this is indeed an extra challenging time, especially with new housemates with very different philosophies and safety protocols.
Mm-hmm.
She's sitting with how to be compassionate with herself, giving herself space to feel, frustration, anger, and sadness, and perhaps expressing it while slowing down to feel compassion for their ideas and their ways. This is really a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, having compassion with yourself for whatever you're feeling, all the time. It's very, very important. I think if you can bring self-compassion, and that's not always easy for some people. I know that I hear people tell me when I coach them, oh, I can be compassionate with somebody else. I just can't be gentle and loving and compassionate with myself. Some people, it's the other way around. And that's fine. I'm just saying that I find most people that I deal with have struggle with self-compassion more than they struggle with compassion for others. That's been my experience. And so what I offer them is, well, why don't you imagine yourself as another person? Just imagine yourself sitting in the chair across the way as just an ordinary person, just like the kind of person that you normally have compassion for, and just see this as another human being. And then see if you can feel compassion then. People generally say, yeah, that works pretty well, actually, And then once you do that, then you can start to, can actually stand up and reach over and give this imaginary person a hug, and then bring it in nice and tight and just wrap it around yourself. It's amazingly powerful and simple. Anybody can do it.
Well, it's so fascinating that we feel somehow we have to have permission to give to extend self-compassion. But we feel how we were raised that giving that compassion or care to others is the way to go. But again, I go back that how we can only, I guess for my story is I was only able to give as much as I was able to give myself first. And when I began to truly connect and love myself for all areas, then how much more compassion and empathy can I have for the world and others? It really, because when I work with clients, the same thing, they'll go out of their way to give to others or whatever it is, but they really have an issue with, or they think that it's not being a good person or whatnot to extend that to themselves, but that's just not, the two of them are intimately connected.
Yeah, that's really true. And that's really true. What I really mean to say is I totally agree with that. It resonates with me entirely. But what I was going to say is you brought up a really good point that I think is something that's easy to gloss over. And you said, I'm only able to give the compassion to others that to the same extent that I'm able to give it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
That is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's, as I was saying earlier, I have found in my work with people that they often tell me they can have compassion for others and not so much for themselves. That part that's their experience. But what I've also learned, and you brought this into focus right now, the more I am able to be compassionate with myself, the greater my compassion for others. It's a beautiful cycle. So if I want to bring more love into the world, I better start here by loving this being right here. Because that is the only way that I can increase my available love and compassion and share it with the world.
Yeah, it starts with your own personal well that's deep, within your psyche, and that you have to be loving enough to start to hunt around through the shadows and lift off that veil to look at all parts. And that's uncomfortable because I've got some ugly stuff in me, and I'm like, I don't want to look at it, and certainly don't want anyone else to see it. But but if I look at it for what it is and just handle it, then I understand that others too, in their own way, are handling and dealing with their own shadows and egos and stuff. And that goes back to that it's a need to be loved and appreciated. Like, we may not say that, but I know for me, I feel validated when I'm treated with what I feel is love.
Sure.
Being recognized, noticed. Yeah.
Stephanie, I'm noticing some facial micro changes, and I'm just wondering if you're having some thoughts you'd like to share.
I have lots of thoughts moving through me, and they change, and I just let them go. I'm not really attached to them. In this moment, I'm really moved by what you're sharing, Nancy, because I can really feel that that's been a great and powerful learning for you, that you're now sharing with your clients that, wow, I can take care of myself. I can be compassionate with myself. And that, yes, it ends up being an overflow for the whole world. But first and foremost, what a beautiful thing to just be able to recognize that, and the areas where maybe we haven't been so compassionate with ourselves. There was a couple of year and a half ago, I did a purpose mapping program, and we looked into all kinds of personality typing. And one of the things we looked at was the Enneagram. And that was towards the end. And talk about going into your shadow. The Enneagram can be very powerful. So, and my type according to the Enneagram is a type 2, which is the helper. And oh my. Now there's a spectrum, and I was fortunately on the healthier end of the spectrum. I've been through a lot of stuff. Like, these behaviors were not exhibiting themselves in ways that were really getting in the way of my life. But I was given the opportunity to see how this identity of the helper and this identity of being compassionate, this is a little different than what we're talking about, but it's occurring to me, so I'm sharing it, was a way for me to feel good about myself and get my needs met through helping other people. And then when they weren't there in that way, there was this like insidious thing, like, I will love you more than anyone's loved you. I will understand you and do for you and help you. But the minute you don't give me what I'm looking for, which is the acknowledgement of how awesome I am, something happens. And there's like something insidious in that, like, you're gonna pay. Now, in the most unhealthy form, it's manipulative.
You're gonna pay.
And
I love it.
like, oh my God. And I saw that. Now, I didn't see it in the extreme form, but I could feel the energy of it still.
Sure.
That there was and I went, oh my God, I have to accept that. And I had like a 24-hour existential crisis. I moved through it pretty quickly, all things considered, but it was like, no, please. But there was the being compassion with myself, because of course, if I thought that I need to be loved in order to be okay, and we all think that, I'm going to do whatever makes sense to me to get that love, including pretending or manipulating. But it's funny. It's like it's real. It's real. It's not that that experience of compassion is not real. It's just that there's also something else. Maybe you would call it, David, the ego mind attaching to it and trying to get its needs met through this thing we're calling compassion. And then it gets all tied up in identity and all of this. So well, I guess just to say, like, this is a journey of compassion, of continual showing up with compassion for myself first and foremost, so that I can also do that for others.
I love how we just bounce around here into some interesting areas, and you've just gone into one of my favorite areas, which is really all about shadow. And I mean, I do a lot of shadow work with people, and the beauty of the shadow is we think it's a bad part of ourselves. That's why we try to hide it or repress it or deny it. We think it's somehow bad. And this is true even if it's actually a nice quality. Like, you know, you're a brilliant musician, let's say, but you try to downplay that. You try to minimize it because you don't want people to think that you're bragging or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is we hide parts of ourselves that we think make us look too big and don't fit in. And so consequently, we are constantly trying to make ourselves look better. And we put on these masks and these costumes, and I think of ourselves as just basically in a big Halloween party, you know. And we're trying to show up. We don't put our true selves out there. We put a representative out there to make us look good. And that's the guy who has to show up at the party and tell all the good jokes and get everybody laughing, and, you know, that sort of stuff. So we all have those parts of ourselves. And one of the work that I try to do with people is to say, well, what if you were to just take all those shadow parts, dig into them, find out the gift and the beauty and the magnificence that's embedded within that shadow part, and really just embrace it and love it and treat it like an amazing part of yourself. Could you do that? Is it possible to acknowledge how amazing and magnificent and wonderful and fantastic you are without sounding like a braggart, without sounding like someone who's full of ego? I believe it is possible. I believe it is possible. And so, I mean, I'm so grateful that you brought this whole thing up, and I'm glad that you are willing to reveal those shadow parts of yourself in a public forum like this. I mean, Rainbow.
Should I be more ashamed? Should I be feeling ashamed or embarrassed right now, David?
You shouldn't. You should be feeling exactly what you're feeling. Whatever that is perfectly okay. All right.
I think, to me, that the word comes up with something a lot of us have is the people, the obliger, somebody who is obligated, or people pleaser. You know, if you look behind that, I know that there's people that just love to volunteer. Like, they're going to have their hand in everything. And and on the external, it's like, oh, that's pretty, wow, they're connected. That's really cool. But really, now I know, because I've done it. All of that giving is inherent on, oh, I'm getting love by being validated when I give. But then the shadow is like, if I don't get my needs met, then then it can be that much more damaging. So there's some very unique fabric of the person who feels obligated, the obliger, because that's one of my tendencies, is I'm an obliger. And I was in the past a people pleaser, just always stepping up, whatever. And I'm like, that's not compassion to me. That was like self-loathing. So
well, there's another point here, though, Nancy, and I'd like to bring this up too.
Yeah.
I don't want to create an idea that just because somebody does something, that implies there's a shadow at play.
Yeah, of course not.
It may or may not be true.
Yeah.
You know, the question that I would ask each person, and I do this with people all the time, I say, okay, there's nothing wrong with asking someone to give you acknowledgement or to give you the kind of love that you want. There's nothing wrong with asking for that. And there's nothing wrong with even maybe doing things for them, pleasing them, making their life better. However, if your only motivation for doing that is to try and get that love, if you're trying to manipulate that love towards yourself, then you're doing it from a place of shadow rather than from a place of just honoring and giving. Okay? And this is where a lot of people don't really understand. If I do something nice for you, and you may even sense this energy, if I'm somehow attaching an expectation to it, I do something nice for you and I'm attaching an unconscious expectation to it, you might feel that energy and might be less inclined to receive the gift. But if you can tell that I'm just giving it out of the openness of my heart, you'll be much more likely to just simply accept it, say thank you. And you may turn around and give me something in return later on. I don't know. It doesn't matter. If there's no attachment there, you can sense the difference. And I think this is what's really, really important for us all to realize. Okay? But I think we're getting off the topic of compassion here a little bit, and that's okay. I'm compassionate with each and every one of us for having moved off topic.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie, for opening that Pandora's box.
Yeah. Wow.
I did want to bring some attention to what Rainbow said here. She said she was getting triggered by one of her housemates who speaks his, quote, "come from love, not fear" teaching before offering empathy or asking if I want support. So I interpret it as judgment and being better. And, I totally resonate with that. Whenever someone comes at me with that kind of energy, because maybe I'm not showing up the way he or she wants me to, I get this sense that there's a feeling of superiority talking to me. That's how it lands on me. And I tend to react. I tend to, as you've probably guessed, Stephanie, I'm an 8. So I have no problem with confrontation.
The 2 and the 8 are like they offer something special for each other, right? Yes.
Well, that explains a lot. Anyway, it explains a lot. But I'm just saying that I have done the Myers-Briggs tests. I've done Enneagram. I've done a lot of other personality stuff, and I am what I am. You'd be surprised to learn that I'm also an introvert. I tend to be. I'm the kind of person who loves to be alone. I mean, I like being with people. I like connecting with people, but I find that kind of draws the energy out of me. So I tend to be more, I want to be alone to recharge. I don't go to people to recharge. Anyway, I guess I'm digressing a little bit. So I'm doing my part to keep us off topic.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of good stuff here on compassion. I just want to get us back on track. I would like to ask what steps you would offer or recommend for cultivating a practice of compassion. How can we make even more compassion or build even more compassion in our lives, especially given the circumstances that we're living in right now?
I was thinking of this very beautiful exercise that I learned in my neuro-linguistic programming training and have used on my own many times since. It's called perceptual positions, and it's really doing what you were suggesting before, David, around stepping into the shoes of different people and looking at things from different perspectives, and doing it in a very physical way. So I'll try to describe it really briefly. But however you do this, however it occurs to you to do this, will be really helpful for you. So
why don't you just walk us through the actual process?
Yeah. Well, I will. So usually it starts out with a conflict. Let's say there's someone that you're having challenges with, someone you're having difficulty experiencing compassion. Maybe it's your troublesome roommate, or it's a parent or a child who, right? So there are 3 positions. So the first position is my position. Let's just say I'm having trouble with my roommate. So I'll go into my position. And what I'm going to do is see the person I'm in conflict with sitting across from me and look at them, or standing across from me. And I'm going to just tell them what I feel. I feel this, me as Stephanie. I feel this way about you. I am upset. I think you should do this. You don't have to hold back here. You're just going through this to really experience what you're experiencing. I'm angry. I think you're, I feel like you're judging me, etc. And just let it all out. And watch this person across from you and how they are responding to you. Then you get up from that position. You actually physically get up and come around to the spot where you were just imagining that person you're in conflict with, and float down into their body and look through their eyes at you now sitting across from you. So now you are the other person, and you're going to speak as them in the first person. So now I'm the person I'm in conflict with, saying, Stephanie, I heard you say this, and I feel this about you. And Stephanie, you are judging me. And Stephanie, and let them say everything that they have to say until they're done. And watch how yourself sitting across from this is a little weird talking about it, right? When you actually have someone walk you through it and you see the spots, it's quite fascinating how easy it is for us to do this with our imagination. I can actually feel myself, like my posture will change as another person, the way I speak may change as I float into them, right? So then you leave the body of that person that you're in conflict with, and you come up to, if you stand on a chair, this is the best way to do this. Position 3 is standing on a chair. It's the neutral observer, like you're a fly on the wall, watching the two people having a conflict, you and the person that you're in conflict with. And you ask yourself, what does this person see? What does this fly on the wall see that I haven't noticed before? And you'll have an experience as this fly on the wall of, oh, Stephanie and her roommate are having a conflict. And look, oh, they're both really doing the best that they can. And oh, wow, they're both really challenged and communicating about it. And this one's triggering this one. And you'll see all kinds of things you didn't see before. And then leaving all that behind, but retaining everything that you've seen without having to make sense of it, go back to your first position, you as yourself, and float down into your body again and look at this person across from you with the new awareness that you now have about what it's like to be them, and also what it's like to see yourself from the outside. And you can speak some more things like what comes up for you now. And inevitably, if you go through that process, you will have much greater compassion for the person that was bugging the hell out of you before, and for yourself, because now you just broadened your awareness of, oh, wow. And if we climb into the shoes of ourselves and our other people, we inevitably find we're really just trying to do the best we can. We are doing the best we can. And sometimes it doesn't show up in a beautiful way, but our intention is there.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say thank you. That's a beautiful process. Yeah. I think I've done processes like that, especially in shadow work, where we're constantly taking different positions and stuff like that. So that it's very, very similar to stuff I've done for parts work or voice dialogue and various other techniques. And all of them help to give the larger being, the higher self, a better view of what's going on. And it also teaches us how to commune more with our higher self. And because we're doing that, then it's easier then to start having compassion more quickly for other people. And as you say, walking a mile in someone's shoes, I think that's a pretty important thing to remember. And that's really what compassion is all about, right? Is stepping into their shoes, understanding their perspective, and hopefully coming from a place of love while doing that. And one of the things I would say, Stephanie, this is a beautiful process for me to build self-awareness, to increase my self-awareness. And just because I have done that, if I now take that new awareness and then go and try and talk to the person who triggered me in the first place, I'll certainly be coming from a different energy. But it doesn't mean they haven't done the same process. So they may not respond to me the way they did in my process. So have compassion for that too. See, it's really important to remember that they didn't go through this little process you went through. They're going through their own challenges in life, and they may not have gone through the things that you thought they went through when you did the process. So try to remember to stay in that place of compassion when you do finally go to speak to this person directly.
Yeah, that's a major key of, again, getting out of your own way enough to bring that positive energy or that energy of thought and response to the person or the situation.
Yeah. There's a process that consists of two parts that I'd like to share with you as well. One of the challenges that I've noticed in relationship is when we have something happen in the relationship that's pretty small, that doesn't really have that much energy to it, but somehow it triggered something inside.
You
Now,
left the toilet seat up again, David.
That's it. I was going to pick that whole example because I know how much you love it. Let's say that I'll pick an example of a stereotypical example of a woman, leaving her nylons all over the house, because after all, women do that, right? And so let's just say I came home and my partner, did that. Okay, no big deal. I leave it alone. I don't respond to it. I just kind of let it go, but it kind of bugs me. And then the next day, something else happens. Maybe the toilet seat thing happens. And again, it's a small thing. I let it go. On the third day, something else really small happens, and I have an explosion. I get all upset. I say, "You're never paying attention to me. You don't give a shit about me, blah, blah, blah." And she's on the other end saying, "What the hell is this?" No clue what caused this to happen. And this is a lot of relationships are like this. It just happens. We don't make a comment about the small things that are bugging us. And what we're ending up doing by doing that, we're withholding information from our partner, and we're kind of putting a little mini brick between us. And as more and more of these bricks come together because we refuse to talk about them, you can see we're slowly building a wall. And eventually, the wall gets so big and so painful that we just kind of blow up and have a reaction. So what we're talking about is sharing withholds. Sharing a withhold. And the way it works is very, very simple. I might come to you, Stephanie or Nancy, it doesn't matter. And I might say, "I have a withhold I'd like to share with you. Are you willing to listen to me right now?" And you might say yes. You might say no. You might say, "Well, I'm actually busy right now. Can we do this in 10 minutes? Whatever the truth is for you, you answer honestly. Mm-hmm. Then once we've agreed that I get to share my withhold, I will simply say, when I came home today, I noticed that nylons were over the couch, and it just really kind of bugged me. I like to keep the place clean, blah, 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 whatever." Your response afterwards is not at all to defend yourself or anything. Your response is simply, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." Walk away. That's the end of the withhold. Now I've shared something from my side, and now you may have a reaction going on, and that's fine, but don't say anything about it right now. Come back later. Come back later and say, "Now I have a withhold. Are you willing to hear it?" And just share the truth. When you told me about this, I noticed I had a bit of reaction, and I was just feeling hurt. And I just want to leave that with you. That's all. Thank you for sharing. Now, you don't have to go through this formal process of sharing withholds. If you're advanced enough and you're able to communicate enough with your partner, you can go through it as a conversation. But the reality is, I share what my truth is without putting it on you as if you've done something bad. I simply say, "When this happened, this is how I felt." Mm-hmm. And you simply say, "Thank you for sharing that. May I respond or not? Would you like a response?" The idea of having the separation gives both of you time to just kind of chill and not have a reaction to it. That's the reason for it. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, we can do the same thing with another form of communication that I like to call sharing an appreciation. Now, who doesn't like to get an appreciation? Well, some people have a hard time with it. But if I was going to do that, I might do exactly the same thing. I might just say, Nancy, I have an appreciation for you. Are you open to hear it?
Sure.
Well, and I might come to you with something like, well, you put a lot of effort. Well, my judgment is you put a lot of effort into that meal tonight. It was absolutely delicious, and I'm just so glad that you put so much love into it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And now your response again is, guess what? Thank you. That's it. No further response necessary. Simply a thank you.
Oh.
Now, maybe later you might want to come back and say, I'm so glad you noticed. You might come back. Maybe that's an appreciation you have for me later on. But do you see the beauty of this? We're building connection and we're reducing those bricks between us. That's what we're doing.
I love that. That's great. They're not asking for a lot of expansive, dialogue. Just that is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, and there's a third piece if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Let's suppose that I believe that you have a withhold that you're not telling me about. This is called a paranoia.
I've never had that.
Because this is the case. What I'm doing is I'm projecting onto you that you, because of some way you're behaving or whatever, I'm projecting that you have some issue with me that you're not sharing. All right? And I have no idea what it is. But there's an energy that's happening between us and I'm feeling it. So I might approach you and say, oh, I'm going to pick on Stephanie. Stephanie, I have a paranoia I would like to share with you. Are you open to hear it? And you say yes or no, whatever the truth.
Or yeah, maybe next week. Well, come back to me again.
All right, I will do that.
Yes, David, I'm open to hearing your paranoia. Please share.
Okay, so it might go something like this. I have noticed that there seems to be some energy happening between us. I don't know what it is. I'm wondering if there is something that you're upset with me about. Can you just check in and let me know if that's true for you? And now you can simply say, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Let me just check in. And now you might respond with, I had a phone call with my mom that's really been upsetting me, and it really has nothing to do with you. I wasn't quite ready to talk to you, but I just want you to know that might be the energy you're feeling. But outside of that, there's nothing. Now I feel better because I had the courage to come and ask you straight up because I sensed something was between us. Now, all three of these pieces, by the way, help us to maintain a loving relationship that is just full of mutual compassion. And I think that combined with Stephanie's suggestion of the parts thing where you're going around in this beautiful circle, and then this idea of sharing withholds, sharing appreciations, and sharing paranoias with your relationship partners can really go a long way towards improving relationships in general.
Yeah, those are really powerful. Thank you for giving us that gift today.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Something to be learned always, all the time with the field of compassion, the area.
Right.
Wow.
So do either of you have any more that you want to say before we close out? First of all, Rainbow just said, thanks for the 3 chairs reminder. So funny how I teach clients a similar process, but in my reactionary state, I forget to do the whole process full out myself. Yeah, well, be gentle with yourself, Rainbow. Remember, we're all human. We're all going through our lives, and sometimes we make mistakes and we forget. So be gentle and be forgiving when you make a mistake.
Yeah, me too. What I am inevitably learning is what I'm sharing with clients and seeing in them, and vice versa. So we're all in it together, I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely true for me as well. Wow. We could have a whole nother show on compassion. Such a vast
well, it is
fabric.
Yeah.
Content.
there is something that has been coming up for me as we've been talking about this. And so if I'm in having one of those situations with my partner, and I think I'm ticked off because they left their nylons around the house, or they didn't take out the garbage, or whatever the thing is, it is never the thing that they did that's upsetting me. It's the meaning I'm giving to it, or the thinking, the story that I'm telling about it. And just acknowledging that, like, oh, I'm the one creating this. It really has nothing to do with what they did. Not saying that it isn't annoying. It is annoying, but the reason it's annoying is because of the stuff that's happening inside of me. Otherwise, it would be neutral and I just respond to it. So how does that tie in with compassion? I think that allows me to access more compassion when I remember that, it really isn't about them. And so maybe it is really, really useful to address it with them, but the whole conversation will be different when I recognize that.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really good point, and I think it's fodder for a new episode, which I would call "It's All About Me." And we can talk about that until we're blue in the face. But I want to say, first of all, I appreciate both of you ladies for being here and supporting me on this journey.
Yeah.
Because I learn more about myself by being on this presentation with you. And I learn a lot about both of you, and I get to meet some great people who come and join us. So it's a wonderful experience for me. It helps me to remember that I'm not alone in this world, even though I happen to live alone right now. So yeah,
you're not alone. We're here with you, David.
I know that. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for your lively, thought-provoking commentary and energy today on this.
Yes, and hi, Alan.
Topic. Yep. Thank you, Victoria, Allen, Rainbow, and everyone who is listening. I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate the energy of compassion that I received being with Stephanie, David, and all of you guys.
Right.
Me too. Here.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, I just want to let you know that in a couple of hours after this show is over, you're going to receive an email requesting feedback. And I would personally request that you take some time to go to that, respond to that email, and give us, your heartfelt, honest, authentic, compassionate 5-star review, because it really helps us to spread the word and get more people involved. And look, don't be inauthentic. If 5 stars isn't what you want, then whatever is true. But I also want to invite you to come join us next time, because we're going to be talking about forgiveness, which is a kind of a related concept. And I'm not sure exactly how we're going to approach this. We're going to have a meeting and we'll talk about it. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Bless you on your journey. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much. Till next time.